All right. Hey, let's start off with the word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for the beautiful weather you blessed us with and the opportunity here to study your word. And I just pray that as we dig into Proverbs and we take a look at what it has to say, I pray that we're able to find wisdom, that we're able to get to know and understand the fear of the Lord, and Lord, that we can become better followers of you. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So today, our lesson is in Proverbs, Proverbs 9. And so that's what we're going to look at. And actually, I'm going to read the whole chapter of Proverbs. It's 18 verses long. I think in the lesson there are 3 verses that are omitted, and I don't 100% know why, but it just is what it is. So when we get to the scripture there, we're going to read all 18 verses. And this is the last of the lessons in Proverbs. And like I said before, I think Proverbs 10 is where it gets into the really interesting advice pieces and wisdom pieces and things like that. So, Proverbs 10 to 31 is where all the good stuff, well, it's all good stuff, but where the advice parts and all that come in. So make sure that those of you listening in and watching this, read Proverbs 10 to 31 at some point. I think there's a lot of good stuff that will speak to you. But our last thing here is in Proverbs 9. And it's an analogy between two themes that we've been studying here in Proverbs. You have wisdom and folly. And at least in my Bible here, the heading says invitations of wisdom and folly. And so we're going to be looking at wisdom and folly, and in the context of them preparing a meal and inviting people over. And so, Steve, since you're the only one here, have you ever had any life-changing dinners? You ever have a dinner in which it was changed your life or some major event happened?
Oh man. No, I can't say that.
Nothing major there anyway, huh?
Yeah, no, man, I've eaten at some pretty interesting places, but nothing that, was life-changing.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting here. Then the commentary was talking about some life-changing meals, and so there's a couple here that I'll read real quick. It says, without a dinner party during a ferocious storm in Switzerland in 1816, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein would have never been written. So we would have that. And then there's a couple other things here. The one here, it says the Passover, without the Passover, there would have been no precedent for the Lord's Supper, which continues to be the most important meal for Christians, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about life-changing meals. And I can't say that I actually had any life-changing meals, but there was one. It was in 2004. The summer of 2004 was in between my junior and senior year of college. And at the time, our family farm was going in a transition, ownership transition, management transition. And so it didn't look like there would be as much work for me on the farm as what there had been in years past. And so it kind of was like, well, what am I going to do with myself? And there was a couple of avenues that I would have taken. But none of them panned out, and ended up that my grandpa had a dinner with his brother. So this brother would be Gerald and Claire's dad, King. And Gerald and Claire have another brother, Kevin, who's in, at the time, I think he just had started being the director of Mennonite Disaster Service. And they were doing they had a work site out in California, in San Diego, California. There were some wildfires that went through in the fall of 2003. And they were waiting on permits to build houses. And because of how people built houses and the different property line disputes and all, they were having a really hard time getting permits. And so to keep this this program active, they got a wood chipper from the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army said, if you will man this chipper, we'll provide the chipper. And so it was over a dinner with my grandpa and his brother that my grandpa found out a need to have someone work for the summer out in San Diego, and he knew I was looking for something. And I spent my summer of 2004 out in San Diego. It was quite interesting. It was a really neat experience, and one that I've taken with me for a long time. Actually, the first group that was out there was from Hershey's Mennonite Church up there in where that Gap area, and the guy that led that youth group out there that first week that I was out there was a teacher at LMH, and actually became my mentor teacher when I started teaching there the next year. So it was just really interesting seeing different connections, with that, and it all started because of a dinner, and just very interesting. And when I saw that here in the commentary of life-changing dinners, it's like, yeah, that fits in there.
Yeah, sure does.
Proverbs 9 is about life-changing dinners. All right, so Solomon makes an dinner analogy of wisdom and folly, and so that's what we're going to be looking at here at this point here. So Steve, can I get you to read for me Proverbs 9, 1 through 18?
Okay. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her maids, and she calls from the highest point in the city. Let all who are simple come in here, she says to those who lack judgment. Come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of understanding. Whoever corrects a mocker invites insult, but whoever rebukes a wicked man incurs abuse. Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Instruct a wise man, and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man, and he will add to his learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through me your days will be many, and your years will be added to your life. And you are wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you are a mocker, you alone will suffer. The woman folly is loud. She is undisciplined and without knowledge. She sits at the door of her house or on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Let all who are simple come in here, she says to those who lack judgment. Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of the grave.
All right, thank you. And so, as we have read here in chapter 9, we have two themes, two ladies here. We have wisdom and we have folly. And so we're going to look at what they are doing here. We're going to look at the differences here between wisdom and folly, and see if there's anything that we can take from this for us. So, verse 9 there, or chapter 9, verse 1, it says, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out its 7 pillars with that. All right, so we're going to start with that. Hewn, Steve, what's hewn mean?
Cut them out like with an axe and, sawed them out. And
yeah.
I mean, 7 pillars, that to me sounds like a pretty good sized house.
That is, isn't it? Do you have 7 pillars on your house?
I don't think so.
You have any pillars in your house?
Well, hopefully, probably no pillars. No, well, yes, 2 out front holding up
the porch.
The front porch, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We have here, a couple different things here. Looking at this house, the seven pillars. We can go there. It's probably a fairly big house, right? Not one
Yeah.
lacking space and all that. What do you take from the seven? Why not eight or six?
Yeah, that kind of intrigued me because it's an odd number.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe it comes to a point at one end. I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe. I know seven. At least the commentaries here say seven is the not is a number of perfection in the Bible. A lot of times when we look at how many days did God create? He created 6 days, and on the seventh day He rested. And so a week is 7 days. And um, if you look in Revelation, it talks about and I believe it's chapter 2. It talks about God's seven spirits going out and the seven horns and you see seven a lot of times like that. And if we take that here as seven meaning and representing perfection and completeness, we look at wisdom's house, and you come in and dine with wisdom, you have the complete package. You have perfection. You're not lacking anything. It's not missing anything. Seven pillars, right, a big house, and enough room for anyone who wants to come in and dine with wisdom. There's enough there. It says here that she hewn out its seven pillars, and that represents work and things that associated with hard work. Plus, it's this house. It's this place of safety, of refuge, and of learning, and that's what we see here with wisdom. And we go inside the house. We see that the house, she has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. And so we see an image here of preparation. We also see an image here of meat. When we think of a meal with meat, is that a extravagant meal, or is that kind of a not extravagant? What would you say, Steve?
I would say extravagance. Yeah.
Right.
Especially talking to a guy like me who loves meat and potatoes, So
Yeah.
it sounds very inviting.
Yeah, sure. No expense left out, right? A very extravagant meal. It actually makes me reflect back every 2 years. All the Mennonite schools in the country get together and have this conference, couple-day conference. And a number of years ago, I was out in Pittsburgh. And we were at this hotel, and we sat down for the evening meal, and they brought out a salad. And so we were all, oh, very good. So we ate the salad, and we we're waiting for the next part of the meal, and that ended up being the whole meal. And we're like, all right. So a bunch of us went out and went and got a burger or something. We needed a little more sustenance than just a little salad. It was interesting. I mean, that for them, that was the whole meal. But we see in verse 2 here, wisdom is going all out, preparing an extravagant meal, expensive, the best. Meat also conjures up the best thing that you can have there too. And so we see that. We see here wine, and not only just wine, but mixed wine. And if we look at through the Old Testament and even New Testament, this was saved for parties and feasts. I think even the title of our lesson here is "Feast with Wisdom." It's this is not just some just get sustenance and be done. This is going to be an extravagant meal. This is where you're going to sit and talk a little while and learn and all that. And so we get that image with the mixed wine. Mixed wine here, they used to put spices in with the wine to make it taste better. And so that's what we get coming out of there as well. And also set her table. So wisdom is expecting guests to come over. It's not something that's unexpected and an afterthought. This is a deliberate a meal and a feast. You see verse 3 that wisdom sends out. My Bible here says her maidens. I think the translation there says send out her servants, and she calls from the highest point of the city. So we see, wisdom's trying to get people to come in all different types of ways, sending out her servants. This send the invitation. But she's not content with that as well. Wisdom is going out to the highest point of the city and calling out and making it a personal point, urgent point to get people to come in and make sure that they are they know where to find this wisdom. Verse 4, let all who are simple come in here. She says to so let's start with that one there. All who are simple. We've talked about simple before, and I believe it's the first lesson. So if you go back to Proverbs 1, it talks a little bit about the simple. And just so we're all on the same page here, those who are simple are the ones that are easily persuaded, that lack judgment, that are immature, that are inexperienced and naive. Those are the qualities that we see here with simple. It says, let all who are simple come in here. She says to those who lack judgment, in verse 5, come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed. Eat and drink. And so that's this here. The commentary brought it out, and I got reflecting on this as well. There's just something about eating a meal with someone that is just a lot different than just having a conversation. And Steve, I don't know do you know why that is? Why is it that, when we get family get-togethers, why don't we just get together and, with your kids and grandkids, why don't you just get together and not, and, when it's dinner time, send them home and that's it? Like, what's it about a meal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure the psychological ramifications of sitting down and eating, but it tends to help people relax and open up and talk but yeah, it's just I think it just helps in for some people, you have this other thing that you're doing, the eating, and so it just kind of opens up conversation and yeah, I'm sure there's a psychological
yeah
for that, but
yeah I'm sure there is too. I haven't researched anything with it, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I just know in my own experience, if you want to have a conversation with someone, a lot of times it's a lot easier even over a meal. It just seems like that's one of those bonding things. Everyone needs to eat, and if you want to have some interesting conversations or discussions or debates or so, a lot of times it seems to go really well over a meal. And
right.
We see this in Scripture, all throughout the meals and the importance that those meals had. Mentioned the Lord's Supper there. That was an important meal for Christ right before he was to be arrested and crucified. Trying to think of some other meals. I remember, there's a story in the Old Testament with David, and it was I should have looked it up, either a son or a grandson of King Saul, and because of David's loyalty or David's respect of who King Saul was,
right.
This grandson was always invited to the dinner table. I want to say like Mephibosheth or something.
That's it.
Is that right?
Yep.
And so
it would have been Saul's grandson. Jonathan's son. Yep. It was
gotcha.
Jonathan's son.
And it was I think there may have been an ailment too. He may have been something with the leg or something. Anyhow, but it was something that.
Yes, he was crippled. Because after Saul's death, Jonathan's death, they were fleeing, and the maid fell and crippled this grandson's legs, and so yeah. Yep.
And so you see some of those. As long as Mephibosheth was alive, he was always invited to David's table to eat there, and all through Scripture we see different times of eating and a meal together as kind of this bonding point, and we see that here as well. Wisdom is saying in verse 5, "Come, eat my food and drink the wine I have mixed." Make sure that we're eating and drinking. We have here verse 6. There we go. Verse 6. Leave your simple ways and you will live. Walk in the way of understanding. Leave and walk, right? If we were English class, what would be the term used for these words? They're verbs.
Verbs. Okay.
Verbs, right? Yeah, you're right. Action words, right? Something
Right.
that we need to do. Action words. And so we hear if you leave and walk. I think we've seen this in the last couple lessons in Proverbs as well. In interacting with wisdom and obtaining wisdom, it's not a passive action or a passive thing that happens. It just doesn't wash over you. You have to do some action here, and we see that here with verse 6, and this is our verse of the week here as well. Leave your simple ways and you will live. Walk in the way of understanding. Wisdom is inviting us to come into her house to eat and drink, and then wisdom is saying that we need to leave our simple ways and we have to walk in the way of understanding. And again, going back to those simple ways, the simple of not having judgment and being naive, immature, inexperienced. Leave those simple ways, because the only way to get out of that type of setting is to actually do it. Like it's an intentional decision on your part to gain experience or to exercise judgment or whatever it may be there. So leave your simple ways and you will live. And we're going to see that here at the end of this first part before we look at folly, that the way of wisdom leads to life. The way of folly is going to lead to death. And we see here right now, what does wisdom offer? Wisdom offers us life. So leave your simple ways and you will live, and walk in the way of understanding. Now, verse 7 is not in our text, but whoever corrects a mocker invites insult. Whoever rebukes a wicked man incurs abuse. And this ties into verse 8 of becoming wise. And so if we look at verse 8, which is kind of the same what verse 7 is, do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man and he will love you. And so we see this action word here happening, rebuke. Steve, when you hear rebuke, what's a rebuke?
Rebuke means you're correcting somebody. You're telling them that, you need to stop this, and this is why you need to stop this. And you're trying to correct something wrong that they're doing.
Yeah. Is there a right way and a wrong way to rebuke someone? What do you think?
Absolutely. Because there can be a harsh rebuke.
Mm-hmm.
You can put them down as you're rebuking them,
mm-hmm.
or you can rebuke them in an attitude of love. I'm trying to help you, instead of, hey, I'm rebuking you and putting you down at the same time.
Yeah. Do you have any guidance as far as how to do a good rebuke? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry, but
well, make sure you have all the facts first.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That's always helpful, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're going to go talk to them or talk to somebody, make sure that you have all the facts. That yes, this is what they've done. But go with an attitude of I'm here to help you learn, grow, and not I'm here to put you down.
Yeah. No, that's good. It just got me thinking that I've often heard when you want to give someone constructive criticism, it's good to use a sandwich method of starting off with a compliment first, going into what it is that you see in them that they should go in and change, and then end up with a compliment as well. So
yeah, that's very good.
Good. You see in verse 8 we have rebukes. we have rebukes, right? So it says, do not rebuke a mocker and he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man and he will love you. And so if we look at some similarities here, we see rebuking happening with the mocker and the wise man. But then we see here, you know, two different outcomes, right? So what is the difference between this mocker and the wise person? If you look at this, if you rebuke a mocker, he's going to hate you. Or if you look back in verse 7, you invite insult on you, or you invite abuse on you. You know, verse 8, we have hate, but then in a wise man, it says he will love you. And so if we look at a difference, Steve, right there with those two people, what's a difference that you can see in between that mocker and wise person?
Well, the mocker does not want to learn from his mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
If he does not want to be corrected, where the wise person will sit back and say, okay, they're coming to me, with this, even if the wise man doesn't agree totally, you can always learn something from someone trying to correct you or give you advice. And so the difference is, one person, the mocker, he has no desire to learn, to change. The man will step back and say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I be a better person?
Yeah. Good. And exactly right. If it's interesting, if you look at and think about very wise people, or people that give out wisdom, they usually tend to be people who know that they don't know it all.
That's right.
And know that there's more for them to learn. And, in knowing that, it makes them wiser still. It's very interesting, just because you're a wise person doesn't mean that you are now the end all, know it all of that.
Yeah. Good point.
And, and I think that's important to know. We look at the life of Solomon, and Solomon was the wisest person or one of the wisest people that ever lived here on earth, outside of Christ. And yet you see what happened to his life, and the things that he allowed to slip into his life, and look at how it changed his life there, and so if we feel that we are wise, if part of our character is not learning new things, or continuing to learn, or improving, or being open to constructive criticism, then I don't know how wise we actually are. And so I think that's, oftentimes we think of wise people, we don't think of someone that needs to continue to learn maybe necessarily, but here, it says, and it's pretty obvious throughout Proverbs that the wise man will continue learning. The wise person is open to, here it says you rebuke a wise man and he's going to love you for it. And so, I think that's an important part of being a wise person, in seeking wisdom, especially godly wisdom. The other difference that we can get from these two people is their humility and pride, right, in their heart.
Exactly
someone
right.
who's very prideful is probably not going to want to change too easily. But someone who has a healthy amount, the healthy pride, with humility spread in there, I think will follow what verse 8 says here to a T. And so that brings up a couple questions here. How do we go about correcting someone who we think is wise? I don't know, in your pastoral history, have you ever had to, talk with people who are, you feel are wise in their spirit, and, have to confront them about something? I know it happens, and there's a lot of confidentiality that has to go with it, but I can imagine that that's a kind of a hard type of thing to do. I know with at one point I was our instructional area leader for the science and applied science department, and we had a conflict between two teachers that I had to mediate, and that was not fun. There are two people I respected and people that have taught for a while. And boy, it was just, yeah. You just had to go in with a lot of grace and humility and, like I said, get all your facts right and try to resolve a conflict there. But yeah, it's definitely not something that's a whole lot of fun. But if the people going into it are wise people, they'll learn from it and hopefully change their ways.
You said grace and humility. I think they are two characteristics that you need to have when dealing with confronting someone.
Yeah,
Sure.
for sure. And then I got thinking, what happens if, we're on the opposite end of that and we think we're the wise person and someone comes and has a constructive criticism. How can we take constructive criticism?
Yeah, I know. Usually I get defensive.
Yeah, right.
That's my first reaction, is that I get defensive. But I have to work through that and say, okay, it's not even, is it totally legitimate? It's, in my mind, is it totally legitimate?
Yeah.
It is, because they're coming to me and I have to just hear what they are saying.
Yeah.
Because just about every time I've been confronted, it's because, they want to help me be a better person. So I have to also understand that and, look at what they're saying in that light.
Yeah.
Really learn something.
Yeah, for sure. So constructive criticism, you're talking about, one of the first things there, what you said is defensive, but if we're seeking after wisdom and godly wisdom, we have to find ways to go into those situations and say, what are the things I can do better? What are some things I can learn from this? And I forget if you said their attitude, but your attitude in it is very crucial with that as well. And so I think that's something for us to work on, because I think we can give constructive criticism better than what we can take it at times. And we need to be, taking this verse 8 to heart. And if we feel that we are wise and someone's rebuking us, we need to make sure we go in with the right attitude with that. And I think it would help out a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 9 says, instruct a wise man and he will be wiser still. Teach a righteous man and he will add to his learning. The characteristic that we see here in the wise man and the righteous man is that there's still instruction and teaching going on. I think we talked a little bit about that. It gives the characteristic of a person who doesn't know, they don't know it all, and they are willing to learn. And I think as long as we're on this side of glory, we're always going to be learning something. We might have more experience and insight and all that, but once we think that we know it all, we're going on a downhill slope. And so, a wise man can still be instructed. A righteous man can still be taught. And that's why we continue to go to church. You don't get to a certain age and say, well, I know everything there is in church, and so I'm going to stay home. Right, Steve?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We don't want that, right?
No, not at all.
You can hear the same passage, and there's always something the Lord can speak to you there. And I think that's a important attitude and a position, a character trait that we need to have in ourselves, that we can always learn something. We can always be taught. We can always be instructed. The analogy that comes out and it still sticks in my head is a number of years ago, I had to teach a forestry class up at school. And when I started this forestry class, I knew what an oak tree was, a maple tree, and that was about it. I knew the basics of plant science, but when it came to tree ID and some other stuff, it was just, not that I wasn't interested in it, but it's just something that wasn't, I never spent time looking at trees. And so I had to take this class. So I did a crash course on forestry and forestry topics and trees and all that. But I knew that if I go in, and actually I teach, this is my way of teaching style too. Going in, you know, I know that there are going to be students that may know more than what I do. I can challenge them and get them to think about things differently. But, in a lot of these classes that I teach, I know that I'm going to have students that may know more than I do. And in that forestry class, I had a student come in whose dad was a forester, and he had spent time out in the woods and all that. And this student was also one you probably classify him as not the most studious student, and so I told him. I just told him. I said, hey, you're going to be helping me out. You're going to be teaching me, and you're going to be helping teach a class, and we're going to go through this. And that was the highlight of his year, a semester in that class. I think he took great joy in knowing more than the teacher did in this subject matter, and all that. And I learned a lot myself from that as well. And I think that's important if we're going after this godly wisdom, going into certain situations. There are facts we need to know, but to really have this first 9 in us, that we can still be instructed, that we can still be taught, that we don't know it all. It makes life so much better for everyone. And so, just that verse 9 there, and having that personal story of students who have known more than me and have taught me is really good. Verse 10, right? We see this. We've seen this all throughout the first lessons here in Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Right? Wisdom is putting knowledge into action. At least that's how I define wisdom: putting knowledge into action. And
Yep.
and you can't have wisdom without having knowledge. Fear of the Lord, the respect of the Lord, the recognizing who the Lord is and what the Lord can do is the beginning of that knowledge. And knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. And again, that all comes through relationships and other things like that. So, verse 10 is just emphasizing what we've talked about before.
Yeah, because if you take the Lord out of the picture, boy, where's that going to leave you? Oh, you have to believe in evolution. You have to believe in chance. You have, and where is that going to lead you if you don't have knowledge of the Holy One?
Right.
You don't have any fear, respect, all of the Lord.
Yeah.
Leads you down a path that is pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, and that knowledge is that worldly knowledge, and how can you have true knowledge if you don't have the Lord in it? I mean,
right.
The Lord, that is the truth and knowledge. So you're basing your whole knowledge on lies and lies, but not the complete truth. I mean, you can't build something on not having the complete truth. And you're exactly right. And you look at the wisdom that comes from that, putting that knowledge into action. Well, if my knowledge is that we're nothing more than random chance, well, then me putting that into action is my actions have no consequences, so I can do whatever I want. Right.
Exactly.
And
right.
So
yeah.
Worldly wisdom, makes sense because their knowledge doesn't have the fear of the Lord in it. And I think that's what we see all throughout Proverbs and Solomon drilling in that, you want to have true wisdom, this godly wisdom that's going to lead to life. You need to start off at the foundation of the fear of the Lord. And you're exactly right. What happens when you take God out of the equation? Well, you get some people thinking and doing some really interesting and funny things. Verse 11 and 12, we see what the reward is for wisdom, right? It says here, for through me your days will be many, your years will be added, and years will be added to your life. And, part of that is, I think, Steve, you mentioned that before, discretion. Discretion is protection. And, you follow after wisdom. By chance there, you're going to lead, years will be added to your life because you're not going to be doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing. I have a life insurance policy, and of course, they started off, they ask you different questions. And one of the questions was something. It was something to the effect of, do you do any extreme sports? Like I don't know if it's snowboarding or skiing, or one was jumping out of airplanes, skydiving. And I said, well, I did go skydiving once. Um, and the person just looked at me, well, is that something that you do on a regular basis? Like, no, it was probably once and done, or I might do it again. And I don't know if that was the answer that person wanted to hear there with that, but you look at wisdom, and following after wisdom, that includes discretion, and that keeps you from doing some of these things that might end your life a little bit more premature. And so, not only from the practical sense of that, but also the spiritual sense that you follow after wisdom, your everlasting life is going to be your reward. Verse 12, if you are wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you are a mocker, you alone will suffer. And again, we're starting to see here the what Christ is going to be proclaiming in his gospel here of, follow after me, you have everlasting life. Apart from me, you have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to verse 13. So verse 13, we see in what folly does. So we have the verse 13, the woman folly. I looked up what folly meant or means, and Google tells me that folly means lack of good sense or foolishness. And so we see the woman folly here, in my translation says is loud. I think in the translation, the commentary says unruly. So we have folly being loud and unruly, which is totally opposite of what wisdom is. She is undisciplined and without knowledge, or simple and knows nothing. Again, opposite here of wisdom. 14, she sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city. Again, we see her sitting at the door of the house, and the commentary brought out, there's no mention of folly building a house. There's no mention of folly, cutting out pillars from rock or wood or whatever. There is no mention of a feast that is available or a place setting, and all that. It just says she sits at the door of her house. And it also says on the highest point of the city. Verse 15, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. We see folly kind of copying what wisdom does, but not exactly, but kind of, sort of. In verse 15 it says those that are trying to follow after wisdom, folly is being a distraction to them. Calling out to those who pass by, go straight on the way. And then verse 16, which was very interesting to me. If you look at verse 16, and you look at now, where is that here? Verse 6, right?
Yeah.
Very, very, very similar. Oh, no, verse 4. Sorry, verse 4. 16 and verse 4 are very, very similar. And, what we see here is folly has almost the same invitation as wisdom. So how do we know the difference between the two? What do you think, Steve?
Because folly is, it says, go back to verse 13, the woman folly is loud. Sometimes, well, you've heard the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The loudest person may get more attention. And
right.
Yeah, they're both giving the same invitation to the simple to come in here.
Right.
So it comes down to, what are each saying?
Yeah.
She says stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious. Okay.
Yeah.
You go back to verse 2, she prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She's also set her table, which to me sounds like it's, a group of people. She set the table for a group of people to come and eat, not food eating in secrets. So I think it comes down to what is being said. Is it truth? Is it not truth? that's where the Holy Spirit can guide you into knowing what is right and what is not right.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly right. And I think that's what we see there. How do we tell the difference there at 17 and 18? It's what is being offered, right? And yeah, you're exactly right what you said there. Let's take a look at there at 17 and 18. 17, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. What do you think about that? Stolen water is sweet. You go and steal water from Jesse. Does that taste sweet to you?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that, analogy at stolen water is sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you're really thirsty. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we look at that, just those two things there. Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious.
Well, that reminds me, Ryan, of, when a kid steals a cookie, they don't stand in the kitchen and eat it. No, they run somewhere, they hide and eat it because, they don't want to get caught.
Yeah. So maybe in that analogy, being able to get away with it just makes the cookie that much sweeter, maybe. And
yeah,
right? Yeah. If you look at this, 17, stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious. I mean, that to me just doesn't make sense, right?
right.
And I think that's the point of it. Folly is trying to make this look better than what it is. Saying stolen water is sweet, just tempting them to do it and saying, hey, this is going to be so much better. But it's water. I mean, it's stolen water. It's not like what we have here up in the first part of the chapter, what wisdom has with the wine, the choice wine, the mixed wine there and all that, right? Stolen water is sweet, food eaten in secret is delicious. It's a lie. It's a lie that folly has to get them to come into our house, right?
Exactly right.
And if you look back, folly is also described as an adulterous woman as well. And if we understand that Proverbs here is written back in the time of the Old Testament for men, looking at the adultery and not committing adultery, and the adulterous woman and other sexual sins like that. Verse 17 here, this is what folly is trying to do, right?
Right.
Something stolen, it's not yours, it's going to be better than what you have. Food eaten in secret, something that people can't see, it's going to be delicious. It's going to be, but no, it's not. It might be a short-term pleasure, but it doesn't lead to life, because we see that in verse 18. Who were the guests in their house, right? It says literally they know that the dead are there. You go in there into Folly's house, the people that are there are dead. Her guests are in the depths of the grave, or if this was written in New Testament time, that'd be hell, right there. The people that follow after folly, there is no life. Even if there is short-term pleasure or gain or whatever, there's no life that we see with wisdom there. And so, we at the end here of these 18 verses, we have an invitation, a dinner invitation from wisdom. We have a dinner invitation from folly. And it seems like, this is the choice that we have to make. And we see this choice many, many times throughout Scripture. Audrey sings a song, the wise man built his house upon a rock, and the foolish man built his house upon the sand. And seeing those two the choices that those people made in that song. Oftentimes you hear about, you can go the path that is narrow or the path that is broad. And this is just another one of those choices that we have here in life. We have the invitation of wisdom and godly wisdom and following after that, or we have the invitation of folly and going after that. And so we have these two choices, right? Two choices are presented. Wisdom, the godly wisdom, and gaining godly wisdom is going to lead to life. Going after folly or listening to folly is going to lead to death. And so in the commentary, and what I'll leave here as well, is choose wisely.
That's right.
Right? You know the knowledge, right? You know the knowledge, and so putting that knowledge into action. Are you going to choose godly wisdom? Are you going to choose the worldly wisdom? The wisdom in that is making the correct choice, and hopefully we all choose to follow after God and godly wisdom and gain the godly wisdom with that. So that's all I have. Steve, you have any final comments with what you see here in chapter 9?
No, that sounds good, Ryan. It's just that the woman folly, her invitation is very inviting.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's very deceiving, because what she's offering, there's really nothing to it. Stolen water and food eaten in secret, it's not satisfying.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And if you have to do something in secret, it kind of makes me, doesn't red flags go up,
Right.
Yeah. Or, someone says, a lot of times we think of phrases as too good to be true, right? And doesn't that put up red flags for us? Someone says something and a flag goes up. Well, that must be too good to be true. Well, then, I don't know. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
So.
Well said.
All right. Excellent. Well, read Proverbs 10 through 31 here in the next, over the summer, and see what Solomon and others have to say to about godly wisdom. Yeah. All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Steve.